Hello, AACPS teachers, and welcome to the November 2022 vodcast brought to you by the Office of Instructional Technology. This month, we're talking about a hack or a cool trick that you can use when you're working with Lumio by Smart's new equation editor. So, first off, those of you who regularly use Lumio are probably aware of the fact that there is now an equation editor built into the platform for teachers to use when building their lessons for students. And it's going to allow you to make some of those more complex mathematical formulas or even use chemistry type and things like that. So, like any other equation editor that you've ever used, you're going to want to use a combination of the tools available inside of the equation editor with those on your keyboard, such as your numbers, your basic math symbols, and even your letters for variables. If you are new to Lumio, the way that you access the equation editor is right here in this toolbar that appears at the top. Again, when you, the teacher, are creating your Lumio lessons, and you would simply select this tool and then click in the workspace where you want to add that equation or formula that you're typing. You can see we've got two larger menu tabs across the top. One is math type and the other one is chem type. And then underneath of those, or within that primary menu option, you have a secondary menu here that gives you access to different types of symbols based on the types of equations, expressions, so on that you might be making. So, all kinds of different options here to make those more complex mathematical equations that you might need to add to the page for your students. The issue becomes, and where the hack comes in, is that if I finish editing this lesson as the teacher and I go to deliver it live to my students, so here we are inside of the live lesson for my students. I don't have access to the equation editor here inside of this window at this point. The toolbar that I have over here on the left-hand side looks pretty similar to what my students would have access to if I were to give them this particular page as a student handout. I can do things like add digital ink to the page, erase it. I have a text tool, but it is just the standard text tool. All I can really change is the font, the color, the size, and so on. I don't have access to the same math type. And what that prevents is that on the fly generation of new equations that we're going to solve or simplify as a class. So let's talk about the hack. How do you get access to the equation editor here inside of a live lesson? Well, the trick is to have an equation on the page before you go live. So if you guys notice, I'm going to click up here on this equation at the very top of my screen. And it's hard to tell in a video, but I'm actually double clicking on this over and over and over again. And you can tell that it's not doing a single thing. This is actually just a picture of an equation. But if we turn our attention instead over here to the right-hand side of the page where we have minus b over 2a, if I double click on this, it was created with the equation editor, and the act of double clicking on it actually opens it to be edited in the equation editor. So we're forcing a live Lumio lesson to allow us access to the equation editor when Smart didn't really intend for this to be a tool that was accessible during the lesson. So, what we would actually recommend is that if you start with any equation on the page, so maybe it would be up here in the upper left-hand corner and the rest of the page is all blank and ready for you to add new equations. When you are ready to add a new one, if you choose this drop down and choose duplicate, you can now put this in your additional white space, double click, remove the text that's here and type in the new equation that you wanted to solve or have your students solve. So it gives you that ability to actually be working on different equations on the fly instead of having to have page after page already set up in your lesson with all of those equations and expressions that you might want to use. One word of caution with using this lovely little hack right here is that if I go into my settings during my live lesson, so that would be done down here with my little people tab over here, if I now choose to turn this into some type of an activity, like an individual handout, group workspace, or a whole class whiteboard, it's actually going to change the way that the content on the page is treated. So now that I've turned this into that individual handout, if I choose to open up the teacher handout, which allows me to demonstrate some things to my students here, you'll notice now when I come over, and again, it's hard to tell in a video, but I am double clicking on this and it is not the same anymore. What happens when you convert to a handout for the students is this now becomes a picture of the equation. So I'm no longer able to get into the equation editor. So this awesome hack that we've come up with for you guys is going to work great for teachers generating equations on the fly. It is not going to work for our students to generate equations on the fly, because once I give this to my students, which I'm doing when I choose individual handout, I'm basically giving everybody their own copy of this page that exists inside of this file. It now treats this as an object or an image on the page rather than something that was composed with the equation editor. So we've now lost the ability to get the equation editor active by double clicking on this equation. So great hack for teachers to work with the equation editor live during your Lumio lessons. Not going to work for your students yet. But I hope you guys learned something cool that you can apply to your next math or science lesson.